Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show, brought to you by Over the Bar. We're back as a trio, as a tripod tonight for the match week review of the Bundesliga match week 22. First of all, Mark, Peter, how are we both doing?
Excellent, sir. Good to be here. Good to see you again. Been a long time. Welcome back. From Dublin.
Yeah, I'm back from my travels, and my wallet is a lot lighter, so I shall be repenting for the next few weeks and doing the show and locking myself in just to watch lots of Bundesliga action. Of course,
Lent is a good time to repent.
This is very true. It's very true. I couldn't have picked a better time. Another match week has been and gone, so it's time for us to review. What we're going to do is obviously we'll go through what were a lot of games that involved some of the sides of the wrong end of the table. So we shall be starting with those matches because they're very important matches and some big wins for sides at the bottom end, as you can see on screen right now. Thanks to Bulinews for allowing us to use their league website as well, which is fantastic. So I guess good place to start, gents, was the Werder match. So Werder versus Bochum, 3-0 to Werder. Very comprehensive victory for the home side, and kind of just summing up against the Bochum, incredibly strong at home, but they're not travelling so well at the moment. Mark, what did you make of Bochum's efforts? I mean, it's one win in 12 away games so far for Bochum on the road. That's the worst record in the division so far. Amazingly, even worse than Stuttgart's. So not ideal. And now with those results at the moment, it's all of a sudden looking not so friendly for Bochum, that league table.
Yeah, I think they just had an absolute nightmare on Saturday, to be honest with you. I thought it was one of their worst performances of the season. I was watching the game and I was just so surprised at how poor they were, because obviously this was a winnable game at the end of the day. You know, Werder have been a little bit up and down since the Rückrunde started. You know, overall, they've still been pretty good. They're a newly promoted side. You know, we don't expect them to win every game. But at the end of the day, this was a winnable game for Bochum, and they just didn't turn up for the game, really. I mean, on the highlights, I think it showed at the end, Antwi Ajayi just kind of passing the ball out of play under no pressure, and that just summed up the away side's afternoon in this game. But I've got to say again, I think Werder were really good. Füllkrug looked back close to his best as well, with a really good finish for the first goal. Good assist as well with the header from Anthony Young. Yeah, I thought that was a really nice start to the game. And then they just kind of dominated after that, really. Obviously, another good assist from Anthony Young, played through to Schmidt, who played it through for 2-0. And basically, I would go as far as saying that Bochum gave up at 2-0, really. I think it was that bad from the away side. And I didn't expect that from Bochum, because we've spent a lot of the Rückrunde praising their performances, actually, especially at home. But even the games away at Bayern Munich, I think they looked pretty solid and they didn't get battered. They didn't allow themselves to be beaten heavily. But this game was really disappointing. And as you can see from the table, they're now back into 17th place. They actually play Schalke at home next week, which is a huge game of football as well. They'd actually go bottom if they lose that game against the on-form Schalke side, you've got to say, at the moment, really. And, you know, things are looking a little bit worrying for Lech and Bochum at the minute. A lot of poor performances, as you see, from Antwi Ajayi, who's been one of their best players this season. He was really poor in the game. I think Kunda's dive as well. What was all that about at 2-0? That was appalling, really. And I'm getting a little bit worried for Bochum again, because, to be honest, I think 3 games ago I was quite confident they'd stay up quite comfortably. But right now, after that performance, I'm not so confident anymore.
Yeah, will it be revenge for Rice next week? Obviously going back to Bochum. So yeah, even so many connotations for that game. But obviously we'll come to that going forwards when we review it next week, no doubt. Peter, it was quite interesting from a statistical point of view as well. I thought this game, because obviously Bochum's XG was very poor, like 0.64, I think it was. 2 shots on target throughout the match, which obviously demonstrates the fact that they were poor and they didn't really get out of Werder as much. But Werder as well only had an XG, and this again is not gospel XG. It's just obviously a stat that people would like to use, and was only 0.89. So it just goes to show that maybe the home side were more clinical. And when you've got the likes of Füllkrug and Duschk from a lovely free kick under the wall, one of those classic ones that goes right underneath, it makes the difference.
Yeah, it was an interesting game on many different levels, I feel. With Bochum, we have to talk about the absentees, of course. Captain Anthony Losilla was not there. Danilo Suarez, the regular left back, was not there. And Ivan Orditz, the Ukrainian central defender, was not there as well. So what Bochum tried to do from a tactical perspective was sort of a mirror of this 3-5-2 or 3-3-2-2, if you prefer to call it that, set of tactics constellation that Bremen ordinarily run. And the quality just simply wasn't there. I mean, it was a very poor game for Erhan Masovic, also for good old Greek name here, Konstantinos Lampropoulos, if I said that correctly. It was by far Werder's best game of the second phase of the season here, of the extended Rückrunde. It's huge that Dux got a free kick goal, because we were just talking about that last week, how their set pieces were just simply not up to snuff. It was an excellent game from Füllkrug, as usual. And Jung with that assist, that was really amazing. He signed a contract extension this week. It was good to see the veteran get into the game positively. Good game from Christian Gross, the sweeper. Also Leonardo Bittencourt, who is ordinarily the buttressing attacker, but he was working out of the wing backs. I mean, they have to have different guys fill in with Mitchell Weiser out. So real complete team performance from Bremen, I thought. That was the best that I had seen the two buttressing attackers play. You have Niklas Schmidt, who I think last week I incorrectly referred to as Niklas Schmid, because I was thinking of Romano Schmid. You have to Romano Schmid, and there's Niklas Schmidt.
Easily done.
And the Dane, Jens Stage. Jens, all the world's a stage. I think this was his best game. That's how I remember how to pronounce his name, because you would think it would be Staga, but no, it is Stage. So I thought he had his best game in Werder. It's a very good game from pretty much everyone involved there. Veljkovic, Friedel, everybody was good. Bochum they didn't have the personnel, and the tactic mirror didn't work. So I wouldn't give up on Bochum necessarily just yet. I think that once they do get Anthony Losilla and Danilo Suarez and also Ivan Orditz back in there, they can stabilize things. You're right about that Schalke match, though, particularly after what we saw from Schalke this weekend. Yeah. I mean, there would be no cause to fear Schalke until what we saw this weekend. So, huge match, relegation 6-pointer, a little bit early, but we got one.
Yeah, and that's a nice little segue into the next game that we'll talk about. But Peter, just quickly, do you have the same fears that Mark has, that that I would say I would have for Bochum as well? Particularly if you look at the goal difference and compare that to the likes of Hoffenheim, Stuttgart, Hertha, even Augsburg, if you consider them in the race, which I guess you have to. So that could be something that's quite damaging later on in the season if they can't pick those goals against back up in the games to come.
It's an excellent point that you raise. I've been pretty big on Bochum. I have been since we did our first Rückrunde preview show. I do believe in them. I believed in Thomas Letsch's system. I liked, how he brought stability back into the ranks there and got particularly the central defense sorted out. But the goal differential is a huge issue. And what Lech has been doing is, with some of these absences, okay, he's found himself prone to experimentation, but he's messing with the tactics too much. And this is why the losses are piling up, and the losses, particularly in terms of goal differential, are piling up. And I would probably, in an early tip, pick Rice and his 4-2-3-1 imperfect as it may be, to beat Lecce's whatever his tactics are going to be this coming weekend. And obviously a loss to Schalke would be devastating for their hopes of staying up. So yeah, I mean, that's a real shame. We love the Vonovia Ruhrstadion. We love the atmosphere. We love the fans. We love Herbert Grönemeyer and all of the things that come with Bochum. You know, I'll sing some Herbert Grönemeyer. You know, there's that wonderful song in which he just basically takes a huge dump over his hometown. Ja, du bist keine Schönstadt. Das ist ein Puls aus Stahl. Niemand will dir besuchen. You know, all of this stuff. And then
I think we just need Bochum to stay up just for that effort. To be fair.
Absolutely. Okay, because I want to sing some more Herbert Grönemeyer on this.
It's not known to be the prettiest town, to be fair, though, Bochum. Like, pretty much everyone that told me about it.
It's a hideously ugly town, but it's a working class town. That's the point.
Well, yes. So we shall sing ourselves across to the Schalke the Stuttgart match, which was a game that VfB fans might have approached with a sense of renewed optimism after a really fine performance at home. Naturally, Stuttgart are a good enough side at home, but they were met in the first half by a Schalke side who found their potency mark and scored two really good goals to put themselves 2-0 up at half time and made it too much for my boys to claw it back.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought they were superb, Schalke, especially in that first half. And as you mentioned, 2 goals that we didn't really think that this Schalke side was capable of, to be honest. The first one, obviously, that brilliant crossing from Frey, which was headed home easily, pretty much put on a plate for him by Frey, wasn't it, really, for Dominic Drexler. And then what a kind of back heel as well from Marius Bulte. It was an amazing goal. A little bit disappointing defending from Sousa on the second goal, I've got to say, before the cross came in. But yeah, I think for me, this game, it was more Schalke being good rather than Stuttgart being bad, to be honest. I've got to say, you know, it didn't look like a game that was 2 sides near the bottom to me. It looked like a pretty good quality game. Obviously, the Stuttgart goal should have been avoided by Farman. He made a pretty poor mistake there. But let's be honest, he kept 4 clean sheets in a row before this game, so we've got to give him a little bit of credit. But I think that Schalke fully deserved the win. You know, if you look at the XG again, they got 1.26 to Stuttgart's 0.95. But I think, let's be honest, most of Stuttgart's XG came in that probably last 20 minutes, really, when Mavropanos fired just over. It looked as though it was going in, that one, when he smashed that one in from the edge of the area. But obviously, in the end, Schalke were hanging on a little bit, but it was a massive win. You could see from the celebrations from Thomas Reis how much that one meant as well. And as you can see from the table, it's now 5 games unbeaten for the Nordrhein-Westfaleners. And, you know, if they win next week, they could come off the bottom of the table, which would be a massive it's a massive carrot in the face of the Schalke team, isn't it? To know they could come off the bottom. And, you know, if they win that game, they've got a chance of staying up for me, you know, because we see a lot of solidity. The likes of Yoshida is playing really well at the moment. I think he started the season really poorly after I tipped him to have a good year when he first signed for them. But since the Rückrunde, he's really improved, especially the last 5-6 games. And, you know, things are looking good for Schalke and Thomas Reis at the moment. And Stuttgart, I still think they'll stay up. After seeing them last week against Köln, I can't say they're going to go down because they were absolutely brilliant in that game. But this game wasn't as good, but I didn't think they were poor as such. But Schalke were just better than them in this game. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, in their 100th meeting between the two sides as well. So it was a game to live up to the occasion, I think. But Peter, I mean, as much as Schalke were good, very good in the first half, Stuttgart did come back into it in the second half, but damning statistic for Stuttgart, and not one that VfB fans really enjoy hearing, would be that Stuttgart have conceded 10 goals inside the opening 15 minutes of games so far this season. That's more than any other team. And obviously their away form is shocking as well. So they can't just keep on going 1-0 down all the time, especially so early on. I guess if you go down 1-0 early on, it gives you more time to come back, which Stuttgart have been capable of doing on a few occasions, but they just keep on giving themselves mountains to climb, really, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, what was so shocking about Schalke Stuttgart was that, I mean, when you looked at the Schalke team sheet, I mean, they were beset by injuries. Tim Skaka and Soichiro Kozuki weren't available on the flanks. They also had lost their two very good offensively minded left backs in Jiri Aronin, the Finn, and Thomas Wijan, the Dutchman. So when you saw Henning Matriciani starting there at left back, you were like, what the? No, this isn't going to work. And it did. I mean, Matriciani was very much involved in that in that opening goal. In the opening 10 minutes, it just shows you how soft the Stuttgart defensive ranks can be. You know, we've been talking about this a lot. We're talking about, you know, Valdemar Anton at right back, and we're talking about this Endo Haraguchi axis and things like this. And we keep going back and forth between whether these are brilliant tactical moves or just dumb, you know. And that's what Stuttgart is showing us. They're showing us this inconsistency, you know. Unfortunately, you know, it's the curse of the sports commentator, as they call it on the broadcast. But you know, one week you're praising Chris Führig, and then the next week you're just like, why did I do that? It's so awful.
Well,
you know?
Yeah, quite easily done.
Or one week you're saying Silas really looks like he's coming back, he's rounding back into form, and then he missed that monster chance.
Oh yeah,
that really should have seen them equalize. You know, so. I see Balam has a question. He's asking, you know, who is bigger, Stuttgart or Schalke? Schalke is by far the much bigger club. It's the more tradition-based club. And you certainly enjoyed those scenes at the Veltins Arena after they came away with that victory. And the Schalke players went to the Fankurve and were able to take a bow and cheer along with the ultras and everything like that, because that's only their third win this season. And it's incredible that they are suddenly now in the relegation race. I think entering, you know, of the weekend, even at, you know, after these goalless draws, even you thought to yourself, Schalke aren't in the relegation race. They're out of the relegation race because they're not in contention for avoiding relegation. And now suddenly they are, because those draws do add up, and you can come within points of safety. I mean, the fact that they're within 3 points of the relegation playoff place, you know, the way that they've played this season and the problems that they've had is frankly sensational. I guess another little factoid that I would throw out there for Balam, since he asked. I mean, Stuttgart and Schalke basically have the same capacity stadiums. They're both 60,000 seaters, and actually, Herbert Grönemeyer could write a song about both Gelsenkirchen and Stuttgart too. These are not pretty towns. Yeah. None of them are really. I would say that yes, you could write a ballad about how ugly all of these towns can be sometimes, but the people in them are certainly not ugly, and the football fans in them are certainly not ugly. And you don't want to see any one of those sides, either one of those sides, relegated. You want to see Hoffenheim relegated, but it's just not. It's
but that's a nice town after all, yeah.
Sinsheim is not
it's a nice area anyway.
The Rhine-Neckar region is a nice area, but there's nothing to do in Sinsheim besides. I mean, there's a museum. They have an aerial or a what do you call it? A aircraft museum there.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
right next to the stadium, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to, and I saw a really bad IMAX film there one time. But that's all I could figure out how to do in Sinsheim. Okay.
Well, let's move on to our whilst we're going slightly off piste, as we sometimes do. Let's refocus our attentions to Berlin, to a snowy Berlin, which obviously the hosts Hertha were able to get a very important 2-0 win over Augsburg. And gents, this match, as they came to life, came to a mediocre kind of level of action in the second half. In the first half was quite tense. Not many clear-cut chances at the very least. And the home side were able to get over the line with a really clean strike by Marco Richter, taking advantage of a free kick that wasn't cleared properly, and a really fine strike, and then the second goal, which came from another free kick, or on this occasion a deeper one, in the Augsburg defence went missing, allowing Dodi Lukebakio to slot home, and who was a real menace and presence in that second half. I don't know if either one of you wants to jump in on this one and see what you thought about his performance and Hertha just picking up enough to get those key 3 points. Augsburg huffed and puffed, but didn't quite get over that goal threat, I guess.
First, I have a question. Do you guys do the orange ball in the snow in England, or? We've got the orange ball. Yeah.
Oh well, it's yellow, I believe, these days. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just curious. Yeah, I mean, it was. It's interesting, this new system that Sandro Schwarz has. We were talking about this last week as well, how he has this 3-5-2. And what he's been doing the last 2 weeks is he's put Marvin Plattenhardt and Marco Richter back as like traditional wing backs. And they both performed very well, I think, in this new constellation. As a matter of fact, there was an article in Sportbild about Hertha actually wanting maybe to extend with Marvin Plattenhardt after all. It's kind of odd that Sandro Schwarz chose him to be the skipper, to be the captain. And then Freddy Bobic announced, when Freddy Bobic was in office, that he wasn't going to re-sign him. So, I mean, you were just thinking to yourself, you publicly embarrass your squad captain. This is a horrible idea. But Hertha have surprised us with a couple of results in recent weeks. The win over Gladbach, which is pretty huge, and this win over Augsburg.
Mm-hmm.
The weather conditions played a big role, as did the Augsburg mistakes. Mm-hmm. Niklas Dorsch, who was filling in for Elvis Rexbegai, he did not have a good game in midfield. He made so many different errors. I mean, his passing rate was awful. Arnie Engels had a game that was finally befitting of his age. Renato Vega was filling in at center back for the injured Felix Uduokai. And they just kept making mistakes after mistakes after mistakes. I mean, I when I was writing the column, I went a little bit on a deep dive into the statistics and stray passes, dribbling rates, all of this dual rates and things like this. The whole Augsburg team was very, very poor. You could see that Hertha weren't that great either, because a better team would have made them pay sooner, and they didn't. Of course, also interesting about this match, Florian Niederlechner started.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that when they worked out his early transfer, he was supposed to join Hertha in the summer, but when they worked out his early transfer, there was a non-compete clause that they put in there, which is common in German football. I don't know, you do that in England as well? Sometimes with loan deals, I imagine.
Only loan deals, I think, in England.
Loan deals. That they say, okay, if the player is going to play against his former team, it's going to cost you extra. It was reported and confirmed that it cost Hertha 300,000 euros to start Florian Niederlechner in there. And did he have a particularly good game? I don't think so.
He missed a sitter in the first 5 minutes. He should have had
very generous to his old team.
But to me, he looked nervous. Like, I think we mentioned it before, Peter, that he's a Bavarian through and through. He almost looked guilty playing for the Berlin club against Bavarians, really, didn't he? Like, I got that feeling, really, But
if you, took to the pitch knowing that you cost your team an extra 300,000 euros, how the hell can you focus with that? You're thinking to yourself, hopefully I score a goal, but no goal is going to be worth, well, maybe in the relegation race, it can be worth 300,000 euros. But, Luca Bacchio, who's been surprisingly moved to the bench recently, I would imagine that he probably starts from this point onward, particularly after he did that. So Luca Bacchio either replaces Niederlechner or Ngankamp in this 3-5-2. And Hertha could get some results. I wrote about it in the column. Do I think that they're going to pull away from the relegation fray? I don't think so. I still don't think that there's enough quality there. And they have problems in central defense. Good Lord, every freaking time. But in central defense, they're having some injuries too. Martin Dardai had to pull out of this one.
Yeah.
He did. And Augustin Rogel and Filip Removic, they're just coming back from injuries too, so they're not 100% fit. Plattenhardt actually filled in central defense towards the end of that game. And, so they're going to continue to have defensive problems, unfortunately, and they're going to continue to have problems with the finishing quality up front. So that's what you're looking at there. I think they're going to factor into the relegation race till the very last day of the season, possibly take the playoff spot. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I think we've got to mention that man Marco Richter as well. That's his third goal in just 4 games against his former club. He's also a Bavarian guy from the Augsburg area as well, I believe. And he's banged in 3. He doesn't score that many, but that's his third goal in just 4 games since he joined them, I think, in January 2022.
And also the 4th Bundesliga player who made a comeback from testicular cancer this year.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, that's a good
Sebastian Haller, Jean-Paul Boetius, and Timo Baumgartel.
Yeah, a lot of people forgot that Marco Richter also got it in all around the same time as well, which is a little bit strange, wasn't it? But thankfully, they all recovered anyway, comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, maybe a bit of good fortune for Hertha with a snowstorm coming to help them in the second half to push them up into 14th place in the relative safety of 14th place. But obviously, as you can see from the table, it is incredibly close. And what we'll do is now we've had a bit of a focus on our kind of relegation race, so we'll do a bit of a split and talk about the Friday night game before we go up even further into the title race, which is obviously heating up even more. And Friday night's game between Mainz and obviously Mönchengladbach was a 4-0 victory for the home side, and just very, very Gladbach, wasn't it? Only they seem to have the ability to lose to Hertha very comfortably a couple of weekends ago, beat the champions, and then subsequently straight after that get hammered again, Mark. But I guess it's probably best not to focus on Gladbach, but mainly give credit to Mainz, who I thought were fantastic in this match and really looked the part, and is such a hard team to beat at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see the different styles that Mainz have as well. I mean, obviously, last week we saw them win that really kind of tight game at Leverkusen. They were probably a little bit lucky to win that game in truth, but they showed a lot of kind of grit and determination. But this week, they just completely outplayed the opposition, basically. I just thought they were brilliant from pretty much the first minute to the last. I would say Gladbach only had one major chance, and that was when Marcus Thuram went one-on-one. And then Robin Zentner made that amazing save as well. So that everyone's just gritting in for this Mainz team at the minute. Ajorque has been an amazing signing for them. Obviously, he got the third goal. I think only his second goal for the team, but the difference he's made, like the way he kind of holds the ball up and helps out the more tricky wide players. The mini magician Lee getting his 6th goal of 2023. What an effort. I think me and Rory have mentioned him quite a lot, saying that we always thought he kind of underperformed a little bit for Mainz because he was really good for Holstein Kiel in the Zweite Liga for a number of years. And he didn't really do that well for his first year at the club, but I just thought he was absolutely brilliant again. Excellent header. I mean, I think he's only about 5'6" or something. He managed to leap up and head into the back of the net, which was a brilliant goal, wasn't it, from him? Brilliant ball in from the wide. Then obviously that man Marcus Ingvartsen, he's not the most skillful player, but that's his 8th goal of the season so far. He got a goal from the rebound after Ajorque had a shot well saved. Obviously for Gladbach, it just didn't work out, did it at all? I think they look aside. Even though they beat Bayern Munich last week, they were poor in this game. And to be honest, they've been poor quite a lot recently, and I think the Bayern Munich win probably papered over the cracks for him and Daniel Farke, to be honest with you, because their performances aren't good enough at the minute. Elvedi was dreadful in this game, absolutely dreadful. He was at fault for the first goal and I think the third goal as well. And I just think, Mainz are going places though, really. They score goals, they have great determination, they have a really, really good team. The likes of Anton Stach, Lee, Ajorque, and even Johnny Burkhardt doesn't even play anymore. Obviously he's had an injury-ravaged season. He was their star player last season, but it's just credit to the job that Bo Svensson's doing there at the club. Like, I think he was linked with the Brighton and Hove Albion job, I think, earlier in the season. And to be honest with you, I think Mainz are going to have a real job on the hands to keep him at the club, because he looks like another quality manager that Mainz have managed to get, obviously after Thomas Tuchel and the Jurgen Klopp as well, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even with that chance at 2-0 for Marcus Thuram, where he controls the ball and goes through, and obviously to have the shot that is saved by Zentner. Do we even think at 2-1 that Gladbach are going to rouse themselves to make a comeback? But I mean, it would be interesting to see, and I'll throw this over to you, Peter, as well. But Gladbach haven't recorded back-to-back wins yet in the Bundesliga. That just...
Well, I never found them particularly convincing. I mean, when I was writing on Gladbach Bayern, the tactical focus piece last week, I mean, for crying out loud, Daya Upamecano got sent off on a red in the 8th minute.
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't a real giant-slaying performance. And Fox's decision to stick with the same 11 with the 4-2-3-1 in Friday night's fixture was absolutely ludicrous. I mean, Stefan Leiner and Nico Avedi were terrible against Bayern. Alassane Plea he's not supposed to play lead striker. He's supposed to be out there on the wings, particularly to the left of Thuram.
Yep.
And you can call me biased for whining about why Joe Scally didn't start, because he's obviously a player that I track for my Americans column. But why the hell wasn't Scally starting? Why wasn't Thuram starting? It made no sense. And with Gladbach, they're just, one really feels for their fans, because their fans are great. They're passionate. Sometimes they cross a line here and there when they attacked Max Ebel, I think, for his burnout issues. But ever since Marco Rose decided that he was going to step up, so to speak, to Dortmund, they've had a club that just has no more real European ambitions. It's just mid-table mediocrity all the time. And that's where they are now. They're not going to compete for Europe. They're not in the relegation race. They're just in this. And this is the third consecutive spring that Gladbach fans have to deal with this. And, one really does feel with them, because there's not, Fark has even admitted, we're not European contenders. We're not going there. Mainz are European contenders. We've talked about Ajorque so many times in this podcast, how important he is, what a vital sighting he is, in terms of the way he holds the ball up, in terms of how he draws coverage. Jae-Sung Lee really pretty much owes everything to Ajorque, this new French signing who has made everything happen to him. And I appreciate Mark bringing up the height issue as well. He is a diminutive man. We'll see. I saw that Balam wanted us to mention that Jürgen Klinsmann is now the South Korean national team trainer. So we'll see what... Maybe I don't want to talk about that so much, because Klinsmann has he's not not exactly, doesn't enjoy favored status among German football fans after what happened with Hertha. Jae-Sung Lee has been fantastic, in large part because of this Ajorque signing. Onasiwo, our friend Onasiwo, who we also can't stop talking about on this pod, was out this time around, but Ingvarsson got a goal because of it. Zentner returned to the 11. Finn Dahmen been doing a good job, but Zentner came in. Svensson made the right call in bringing Zentner in, and he made some excellent saves. He brought Core back, Dominic Hardcore into the 11. But he kept out Sylvain Widmer. He kept out his captain, because he liked the way that Danny Da Costa was playing, and Danny Da Costa played another great game. The Frankfurt cast-off. So, in my column, the hot tip for Mainz for me is that they are the team to get that extra special coveted UEFA Europa Conference League playoff spot in 7th place.
Prestigious.
Yeah, very prestigious. It's a wonderful honor. I wonder if it's something that teams even want to play for, but they would be my pick to finish in 7th. If they want to. One other thing about Bo Svensson. when he was appointed the trainer at Mainz, this was shortly afterwards, Thomas Tuchel was appointed the trainer of Chelsea. And people could not stop calling every freaking podcast that I listened to, every English source that I was reading. Everybody wanted to talk to Bo Svensson, because everybody wanted to know if Bo Svensson was going to take the same career trajectory that Jurgen Klopp and Thomas Tuchel did. And he might, Of course, if Nagelsmann doesn't win the league this year, then Thomas Tuchel is coming over to coach Bayern. But you probably, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Bo Svensson follow the path of Klopp and Tuchel, to the Premiership. That's how good a coach he is.
Yeah,
agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we scrolled up now to the top end of the table, where we can obviously see Mainz settling in very nicely, in very good form as well. But yeah, we'll kind of talk about the title race now, and the games that really impacted the top end of a very tight Bundesliga table. And we'll start off with the champions, who looked very, very good. They looked good in the first half and looked very dangerous, and made Union just camp in their own box for a long period, eventually succumbing to a Choupo-Moting header, knocking it back from where it came after a Kingsley Coman cross. Although I thought that the pass before it from Joshua Kimmich might have been intercepted, but Union were, of course, under a lot of pressure before that anyhow. And then a couple of quick goals before half-time. One for the birthday boy, Musiala, after being set up by the man in effect that is there to replace Thomas Müller. Müller also assisted for Kingsley Coman's goal, although Union was split apart there, playing slightly higher on that particular moment of the game, and it was 3-0. And after that, it was a pretty plain sailing, Mark, other than maybe a chance for Geraldo Becker in the second half. But Bayern looking rather, like they wanted to make a point on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's just typical Bayern when they play teams at the top of the league, basically, isn't it? I think we always talk about their record against those kind of teams. Obviously, they only drew away from home against Union Berlin earlier in the season, but they made sure they wouldn't go away unbeaten in this one. And for me, it was more of a case of Union just looking a little bit leggy at the minute. I think, obviously, they're playing Europa League now. They played the last two Thursday evenings, and obviously a famous win over Ajax Amsterdam as well. I mean, that it doesn't get better than that for Union Berlin to turn over one of the European giants on their own park. But the thing is, to then go just 3 days later to the Allianz and get a result, it just proved a step too far for the East Berliners. I just think that they weren't terrible in the game. They did have a couple of chances through Laidini early on in the game, and also through Roussillon. But I think if one of those had gone in, they could have maybe competed a little bit better. But to be honest, as often teams do, once Choupo-Moting got that opening goal, I think Union just kind of faded off, didn't they? I think maybe it was a lack of belief, but I also think it was perhaps they were just too tired, because as we mentioned before, I think Union, they don't have the rotation that some other teams do. They tend to rotate the fullbacks. I think Juranovic often is rotated and Roussillon, but they don't have the likes of Khedira plays pretty much every game, and Geraldo Becker plays, 90-95% of games from the start. And those kind of guys are going to start getting tired. That's the problem, because you've got to remember, Union, they're still in the cup as well. So it's just too many games. And I think that's going to be a problem for Union between now and the end of the season. And it's going to be hard for them to get Champions League. I think we've always said that they're probably not title contenders. But, I mean, Champions League will be the goal. But I think the issue for them, they might have to prioritise. And it looks as though they're prioritising Europa League to me, from what I can see. And obviously, they've got quite a favourable draw in the last 16 now against Union Galloise of Belgium. Mm-hmm. So I think, they've got a chance of making the last 8 of that now after that famous win over Ajax. But in the league, it's going to be harder. I really do believe that. They were quite poor against Schalke last week as well. They didn't create anything really in that game. No. And let's be honest, they didn't create much here against Bayern either. So 2 blanks that they've drawn in the last 2 Bundesliga games, and it's going to be hard for them to go again next week, I think.
Yeah, and there's more good news, Peter, as well for Bayern, seeing the return of Sadio Mane after 110 days out through injury, and looked pretty good. Tried to very selflessly set up Muller right at the end. Somehow Muller not scoring where he hit the ball at Renault's head, which is a very fine save in the end. Yeah. I think a lot of positives to Bayern to take and confidence to take forward into the weeks to come.
I mean, it's Mark summed it up. Unfortunately, it wasn't much of a football match, and it's kind of what we expect. Well, look, the Europa League schedule can be downright brutal and criminal at times. You really felt for Union because they had to play back-to-back midweek matches. Bayern had midweek off, and fatigue played a great role. I mean, Urs Fischer's rotations are actually pretty decent. They are pretty sensible because he always sticks with that 3-5-2 double stack system. But you just had the feeling that, I mean, Union they're not an explosive team. They're a grinded out team. And I still think that there's top four contenders. To answer the question I see from Ballum there, I think that this weekend, even though arithmetically, they're only 3 points off the top, I think that this weekend probably was the end of the title hopes for both Union Berlin and Eintracht Frankfurt, whom we can talk about in a second. The Leipzig game there. That's the end for Eintracht's title hopes as well. We talked about it being a 3-horse race last week between Dortmund, Bayern, and Leipzig. That was more or less confirmed this weekend. Probably one of the reasons why we started off with the relegation race, because that was a little bit more interesting to discuss than some of the things that happened in the title race this season, which were disappointment for the German fans. I mean, it's all good news for Bayern, really. I mean, the system that Nagelsmann had there, where he had, it was a 4-2-3-1, but it turned into a 3-4-1-2 on the ball, and Thomas Müller was the second striker alongside Choupo-Moting. He collected 2 assists, when this was still something kind of resembling a football match. So he's got Müller in form. He's got Sadio Mane coming back. He's got some additional rest. He's already learned his lessons about some of the dumber rotations that he made, last week against Gladbach. So, yeah, it's all good news for Bayern, unfortunately.
Yes, and a certain Sud derby to come does not fill me with tremendous amounts of confidence. Although, interesting point from Ballum in the comments saying, does he think that we reckon that Nagelsmann might rotate with Paris coming up, or the trip to Paris next week? Possibly, and Stuttgart got a half decent result against Bayern in the Hinrunde.
But who are you? He's going to rotate in, Leroy Sané and Serge Gnabry. Gee, oh no. Whatever.
Yeah, I think Matthias Tell started the reverse fixture earlier on this season, I believe, or definitely had a big part to play. But yeah, I mean, none of it.
That was before Choupo actually became the player that he is now. So he was having real problems with striker. And I mean, he's got Choupo now. He's got Müller who can serve up alongside him. He can play Mane on the wings, when he feels that Mane is ready to start. And Coman can play on either flank. So, I mean, it's...
Yeah, and shout out to Thomas Müller as well, going ahead of Oliver Kahn in terms of Bundesliga. I think in overall appearances for the legendary German champion. So
never ever count out Thomas Müller. Don't just stop doing it. Stop saying, "Oh, he's finally past his prime," and just stop doing it. He will always prove you wrong. Always.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll move on to Dortmund's game in a second. One quick question I just want to come to from Dan. Bit of a teaser, this one. So let's put it up on the screen. If you had to be a season ticket holder at one of RB, Leipzig, or Hoffenheim, or give up football, what would you choose? I mean, I know what I would choose, but I'm not thrown in deep history of Bundesliga football or German culture. So I'll throw this over to Mark first, and then you, Peter, to follow up.
It's a hard one, but I'm going to go for the Rasenball guys. Yeah, I'm going to go for RB Leipzig. Yeah, I don't know. I just think, I know a lot of German people don't like them, but for me, I just like the project. I think maybe it's because obviously coming from England, we don't really care that much about money, so to speak, in football clubs. And I think I do like the project, how they kind of sign young players and try to build them up and things like that. And I've always been attracted to the way they play good football as well. And the fact that they've kind of become genuine title challengers to Bayern Munich, who, in my view, have dominated the league for too long. I will be honest. Hoffenheim just do nothing for me, really. I'm going to be honest. I think even the fans, like RB Leipzig, they almost sell out every game to 90% full, roughly. Okay, maybe some of the less attractive games only get maybe 80%. But if you look at Hoffenheim Stadium at the minute, I think there's more away fans than home fans at a lot of games, to be honest. So, it just seems as though their fans have literally given up on football, apart from a small bank of ultras in front of the goal at the moment. That's all you can really see from the Hoffenheim fans. But for me, I'm going to choose RB Leipzig.
Yeah, Peter, would you give up football entirely?
Well, that's a hell of a hypothetical. As I was thinking about it, I can't give up football entirely, period. I mean, that's not an option for me ever. I mean,
agreed.
Go to church instead? I'm not. Football is my church. So, I would go with Abe. As we talked about several times, Leipzig are not as universally hated as Hoffenheim because Germans we were happy that the East was getting some representation. But they've become much, much, much more hated once again after the rise of FC Union Berlin, because that's another Eastern club. And now we figure the East has real representation. But I credit the Leipzig Ultras with what they're trying to do, with their cheering, with their support, with their banners. Like to see more choreo, from them, a little bit more creativity from them. But they do their bit. They try to make a nice atmosphere in the stadium. It's not the worst feeling in the world to go to a Leipzig match, So I credit with the way that they're trying and they're growing, and maybe eventually we can consider Leipzig, company teams like Wolfsburg or Leverkusen, even though it's a foreign company. And I'm still not considering Hoffenheim a company team because, as Mark pointed out earlier, SAP software is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, we had a comment about that earlier on, actually. I'd have to go back and find it, about someone using it in their old work. They did not like it.
It's a good one.
I don't blame you whatsoever. Right then, so Dortmund won, Hoffenheim 0. Possibly a match that, or a scoreline that not many people were anticipating. I think a lot of people thought that Dortmund would maybe win by a few more, considering how poor Hoffenheim currently are. I'm sure a lot of people, as we've just spoken about, would have wanted it to be a bigger scoreline. But despite the fact it was 1-0, Mark, I think there was plenty of chances at both ends, actually, for this game, and maybe it wasn't as possibly dull, if you can call it that, just by watching or just by seeing the scoreline. In as much as Dortmund did have to ride their luck, though, a couple of very big chances that Hoffenheim somehow did not put away.
Yeah, I think obviously early on it was an absolute sitter miss by Kabak in the end, wasn't it? I mean, it was an amazing save initially by probably the best goalkeeper in the Bundesliga at the moment, Kobel. He made a really good save, but then Kabak has to be putting away that rebound, really, and he ended up heading it over from pretty much an empty net, basically. But then Dortmund went on to dominate the rest of the first half, and it was basically Aller versus Baumann in in the Hoffenheim net for a while. I think he made about 3 saves from the big forward in the space of about 10, 15 minutes. Then obviously Schlotterbeck had one well saved as well. And eventually, in the end, it was that man, the man of the moment, wasn't it? Julian Brandt, who got probably one of the strangest goals you're going to see this season. It kind of went in off his back, really, from the Marco Reus free kick, didn't it? But that just sums up what's happening for the winger at the moment. Like, everything's going right for him, isn't it? And, you know, this wasn't one of his better goals that we've seen in recent weeks, but it was another important strike from him. I think that's his 8th goal of the season now. Most of them have come in 2023 as well. It's been a superb run for the wide player. But yeah, I mean, the second half, obviously Kramaric missed a few chances, didn't he, in that second half? And it was a decent performance from Hoffenheim. I think it gives Pellegrino Matarazzo a little bit of encouragement going into the next few games, although they do have another couple of difficult fixtures away at Mainz and Freiburg coming up next. But I just think, you know, they weren't amazingly good, Hoffenheim, but it was a case of probably Dortmund, you know, weren't the most clinical best. You know, Aller, as I say, missed a few chances. They missed a hatful of chances, basically, let's be honest. A lot of that was down to Baumann's good goalkeeping as well. I've got to say he had a really good game. But as you mentioned, Hoffenheim could have got a point in the end, although it probably wouldn't have been deserved overall, I wouldn't say.
Battle of the keeper.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were saying something?
No, I was just saying that both Kobel and Baumann were both in inspired form, because, of course, Baumann kept Kobel out of the team at Hoffenheim for a long while. Yeah,
I mean, it was an encouraging game for. Mark said all there is to say about that, really, and including the Julian Brandt finish off of his back. I mean, that was when things are going your way, they're going your way. So Julian Brandt is leading the Dortmund team now. We talked about how this is a different Dortmund. Everybody in the Bundesrepublik is very, very excited about this. That is their 9th consecutive victory. The first time they've ever started off a calendar year with 9 consecutive victories. The goals and the assists are all spread out throughout the team. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. They have, you know, they have a good coach. They have excellent tactics. I would say that, you know, Hoffenheim generated some chances. Dortmund had far, far more quality chances. I mean, they looked. This was a most deserved win, and I hope they beat Leipzig on Friday. We really need them to. That's a huge match, absolutely.
Dortmund's form is. Well, they're the only team in Europe's top 10 leagues, depending on how you classify Europe's top 10 leagues, with a 100% record in 2023. And slight contrast to Hoffenheim, who have picked up 1 point from 10 games against teams in the top half of the Bundesliga table this season. So struggling somewhat, struggling against anyone that they play, really. Dortmund... Staying well in the title race and looking good ahead of that massive game on Friday night, which very much looking forward to watching. And speaking of the team that they're going to play, Leipzig, as we say, confirmed their status, their intentions to also be in this title race with an impressive 2-1 win over Frankfurt, and they came out of the blocks really, really fast, off the back of a good result against Manchester City in the Champions League, and Timo Werner and Emil Forsberg were just being kind to each other. But although the first goal comes from a very, very poor mistake from Tuta, trying to control a ball out of the air, naturally players with high skill would expect themselves to do that, gents. But do we think in the first instance, 5 minutes into the match, you're just looking at that ball coming out of the sky and you're thinking, should I maybe volley that clear or try and bring it down with one touch? And Forsberg, of course, steals in, knocks in his mate Werner, who almost falls over and messes up the chance. But it was an unfortunate moment for the centre-back, which got Leipzig onto the front foot straight away, didn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be a Steve Bruce style into the stands for me, that one. You can't be taking chances after just 5 minutes of the game. It's just Tuta, I do like him as a defender, but it's not the first time he's made a big mistake in a key moment. I think he did a very similar kind of mistake in the Europa League final last year, actually, if I remember rightly. And I think he is a good defender who's improving season to season, but this was a poor mistake from him. Obviously, a lot of luck on the finish as well from Werner. He almost slipped over and it kind of somehow bundled into the net. I think it was a bit of a relief for Timo Werner, that one, because definitely wasn't one of his cleaner finishes from the older days of obviously RB Leipzig in his first stint, when he pretty much finished everything when he went one-on-one, didn't he? But from then on, it was a really good first half from RB Leipzig. The second goal was a really nice move, which was finished by Emil Forsberg. And I just saw Frankfurt look flat, to be honest. It was a big game. They knew they had to win this game if they wanted to stay in the title race for me. And it's just summed up pretty much the Rückrunde for them. I think both me and Peter, we both tipped them to have a big Rückrunde, and they were absolutely schooled by Napoli in midweek as well. Like, that was a complete demolition job, basically. It really was. Like, it was men against boys, that really, let's be honest. And to be honest, the first half in this game was similar. Obviously, Frankfurt, they came back into it well in the second half, and they had obviously a decent goal through Sau, but there just wasn't enough in it really for them. They didn't push hard enough for that equaliser. And let's be honest, their season is starting to look. I'm not saying it's going to be a bad season, because they'll still get Europa League and they still got through the Champions League group, but it's not looking as good as it did. Let's be honest with Frankfurt. And Oliver Glasner has maybe been rotating a little bit too little at times, and maybe his team is getting a bit leggy as well. We've already mentioned Jesper Lindström. He's not been looking very good at all recently, and I'm a little bit worried for them at the minute because they're not looking very good. Kolo Muani is still looking good, but the rest of the team is just looking flat and maybe a bit leggy at the moment as well.
Well, this was the tactical focus piece of my weekly column, which means that I had to write a second-by-second report on this. And, in addition to watching every second of it and taking detailed notes, it ripped my heart straight out of my chest. This one, Leipzig slaughtered Frankfurt. Emil Forsberg said, well, the second half was different. Not really. Frankfurt, they came out, they had some better play, but this was just a thoroughly dominant performance. Leipzig came out of this, they came storming out of the gate. I hardly blame Tuta for making that mistake, because they were just being punished so severely. They were rattled. They couldn't find their feet at all. The big problem for Frankfurt was, of course, that Mario Götze wasn't available on short notice. He was not underneath Kolo Muani. Kamada couldn't quite make it work. Lindström supplied some wonderful dribbles. He got behind the Leipzig defense, and he was doing all this fancy stuff in the box, but he couldn't find the final ball, or he couldn't locate Kolo Muani. Yeah, basically what happened in this one was that, and this is more good news for Bayern, unfortunately, Konrad Laimer came out like a man possessed. And it was Konrad Laimer who really got the Leipzig charge rolling. And so the future Bayern player just went ahead and schooled, the club that I really hoped was going to contend for the title this year. And so it was just bad, painful thing for German football fans to watch. If they had Götze, maybe it would have been a different story. But they didn't, and Conny Laimer and Timo Werner and Emil Forsberg, and they just came out and they took it straight to him, and it was, there was a slight comeback from Frankfurt in the second half, but the last 20 minutes, when Frankfurt had a chance to equalize, it was all Leipzig. It was Leipzig coming closer to the 3-1. So the last 20 minutes weren't even competitive at all. And fatigue plays a role. Rotating too little plays a role. Tuta, Knauf had a nightmare match on that right-hand side, the Leipzig left. And, wow, what else can one say? It just makes one sad.
Right. And on that note, well, we don't want to finish on a sad note, but
you want to very quickly answer the question about Köln? Speaking of sad.
Yes, we'll up on screen now from Herodotos.
Right, that's the only match that we didn't cover. This is Köln have they've scored. I was writing this in the column. Elias Skiri has scored like 5 of their 7 goals or something this season. It's ridiculous. And they have, they were missing Florian Kainz in this one. This is a horrible match because the choreo inside the Rhein-Energiestadion was beautiful. They were celebrating the 70th anniversary and everything. And this was in front of the hometown fans. And they were just so one-dimensional. I think they sent in like 30 crosses on both sides. And Stefan Tigges and Davy Selke were nowhere near any of them. So the problem is that, they just don't have the quality, and we've talked about that before. And you should really be concerned about Köln because they need goals from somebody other than Skiri. And that's all I'll say about that, so that we don't run too much over.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just a mention to Vincenzo Grifo's lovely free kick as well, which probably the second game that we didn't cover in the 1-1 draw with Leverkusen. So yeah, I think that will bring the show to a close tonight, but fantastic to go through another really interesting match week of the Bundesliga. Looking ahead, it looks like a fascinating match week 23, which obviously starts on Friday night with that massive game, Dortmund versus Leipzig. Definitely one to tune into if you can do. And so all there really is to say is thank you all for watching and tuning in, for your comments. Make sure you smash a like on the video. Make sure you press the red button and subscribe to the channel. And I shall gladly hand over to Mark to bring things to a close.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you enjoyed what you saw tonight, then remember, check out our Twitter @OverTheBarFB and @OverTheBarExtra. Also check out our main site, which is otbfootball.net. So as I've mentioned before, we have just about everything football related on there. We're not only a Bundesliga channel. So yeah, check out some of our written articles on there as well. The guys do a really good job maintaining that. And then, yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube as well. Yeah, remember also to leave your comments as well, because we want to keep interacting with you guys. We've had another good night of interaction tonight. So thanks to the likes of Mark, Paul, Dan, and obviously Ballum, for their interesting comments as well, which really helped the show. And thanks again to Petre for joining us. We look forward to the next time. So, yeah, thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you all next time. Ciao.